I never imagined I would end up married to a woman. When I met the person who is now my wife, who I am going to call Paula because that is not and has never been her real name, she was a man who I'm going to call Paul for the same reasons. 2 years into dating, Paul told me he was bi. 2 years after we were married, Paul came out as trans and chose the name Paula for herself. I am not going to pretend that Paula's transition was easy for her or me, because it was not. There are people who will say it would not make the slightest bit of difference to them if their spouse or partner suddenly transitioned. And there are people for whom that is even true. But I am not one of them. But I've tried. God damn it. I am trying. I went to couples therapy with her. I went to her own therapy sessions when she asked. I got a therapist of my own. I read books. I reached out to other people with similar experiences. I stood by her when her family and people who'd been friends pushed back, spoke out against my friends' and family's transphobic comments when they came up. I stared dumbly as 3 different therapists heard my story, tut-tutted, and called me bigoted to my face and said I needed to either get on board or get divorced. So I got on board. We burned our wedding album because she couldn't bear to look at her past self in a tux, and I did so much more. And I am not saying that because I want or expect any kind of kudos, and I do not for 1 second imagine that relative to other cis spouses of other trans people, I have done anything noteworthy or had a more difficult than usual time of it. But I so freaking tried. And I did it because, while the person I loved was no longer a man, she was still the person I loved. And I did all of it while strangers and people I loved attacked me for being the transphobic one if I ever expressed a moment of shock, a moment of hesitation or uncertainty, or a moment of, oh my God, this is a lot of change all at once. Can I please sit down for even 1 minute so I literally don't collapse from the panic attack I am literally having, literally right now? And then, this week, at 10:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, there's a man in a suit and a Hitler haircut at my cubicle, handing me a stack of papers that say separation agreement on the top. He's whisper shouting at me that I need to sign right now or there will be consequences, and he will not agree to take this to a private conference room away from the looky-loos. I tell him to wait while I call my wife, and she lets out a long, exasperated sigh when she picks up. I tell her about Hitler Man, and she says he's legit, and with 1 sentence, does her level best to tear my heart out and throw it into a fire. I just can't stay married to some damn dyke, she said. And when I came home, all of my things were packed in suitcases by the front door, and so very many of our friends were there to support her. I think it's easier this way, she said. She works from home, you see. Totally logical. So she gets my support, our house, and our friends, and I get called some damn dyke and thrown out on the street by a gang of people champing at the bit to dogpile on me if I am anything less than 1000% supportive of the person harassing me at work and kicking me out of my own home. Top comments. Wow, that is just wrong. I am so sorry that you were used and betrayed like that. The fact you supported the change and then she bit you like that. If you need someone to vent to, please reach out to me. I am pretty much always available. Somebody said, damn that. Wow, what a punch in the gut. I cannot even imagine what you must be feeling. I have 2 female friends whose husbands transitioned to female, both ended up divorced, and both struggled with it. That's a tough, complicated thing, and I think it's perfectly okay for you to have a struggle with it. It doesn't make you transphobic. All change is hard, and there should have been a grieving period for you, so you could grieve the life you thought you had and figure out how to embrace the changes. Jesus, girl, this ex of yours sounds toxic as hell. Good riddance. Someone said, I don't want to be that person, but were those therapists legit? Because every hetero couple I've known who had one of them transitioned, the therapist would always tell the trans individual to try and give time and space for the other spouse to process, because while you've basically known your whole life that you're trans, your partner didn't. I wish you best, and I hope you move on from those people, because that is very hurtful and toxic, and for your partner to have literally thrown all of this on you in one day, that's some shitty crap. I hope you're able to grow and love again, and not turn bitter, not for anyone but yourself, because it sucks being bitter. It sucks like there's no tomorrow. And I know you love her still because she's the person you fell in love with. But if she tries to win you back, please don't. I have no idea what it's like to be in your exact situation, but my ex told everyone lies about me, about how I was mean and verbally abusive, when actually he's the one who was, and I lost all of my friends I had through him. And it was hard when people were supporting him to break up with me, when he did it so he could sleep with a girl, and a week later tried to get me back. I was stupid and did it. It ended just like the first time. The second post was posted by the partner, my partner, Mask NB and I, CSM, are poly, which I understand will be a deal breaker for many people here. If you are one of them, please move on and do not add to the dog pile that is our lives. Thanks. And thank you to everyone for reading my late-night ramblings and inquiries. Background. Partner and I met our beloved almost a year ago. This Thursday would have been our 1-year anniversary. At the time, she had just started working again, was just coming off of her probationary period, and was still shackled to her spouse, joyless cis F. We partnered beloved, and I proceeded carefully and discreetly with our courtship, because for the first months, beloved was still wholly dependent on her spouse's insurance to cover prescriptions and procedures, but once beloved was secure, recovered from surgery, and cleared to work from home full-time, we started seriously considering our futures together. Beloved ultimately agreed that the honest thing to do would be to divorce her spouse. So with the help of some of Beloved's friends, partner and I broke the news to her spouse, served her with papers, packed up her things in the nicest suitcases she had, and helped her move out and move us in. I wish this were simply a catty story with a happy ending, or even no ending at all. But life and love are never so easy, as I'm sure all of us here know firsthand. Beloved's spouse refused to agree to our terms, refused to even sign the papers. Partner hand-delivered to her. I am grateful we had so many people with us when she came to our house, because I fear she would have turned violent without them, and those are both just from the first day. She hired a lawyer to fight the divorce, a no-fault divorce, at that, and demanded beloved buy her own house back from her blood money. This was after she had abandoned it. Let me remind you, beloved's spouse refused to budge, refused to settle, refused to negotiate, barely restrained her contempt in talking to us, and I'm sure it was no coincidence that whenever her lawyer named beloved, she very begrudgingly corrected him, as if to claim she was some woke princess of power rather than the frigid soul who had hired that troglodyte to begin with. Her virtue signaling didn't end there either. As the months wore on, she held every mortgage payment she made above us, as though it were some kind of moral victory or virtue signaling, rather than her paying for the house she supposedly wanted us to buy from her so desperately. Beloved did not handle the stress well, at all. I suspect, but cannot prove, that this is what her spouse had intended all along. On Friday, May 1st, while partner and I were making another trip to move our things over from the old apartment, beloved died by suicide. Before her body was even scarcely cold, her spouse had swooped in, claimed the body, and had her burned. A week later, she snuck to our house and taped a notice to quit to our door, claiming that she was suddenly our landlord now and that we owed her rent for a house she had previously demanded we buy from her. While partner was on hold with legal aid, I checked the mail and saw an identical notice in a certified mail envelope. We burned that one. It seemed fitting. My friends, partner and I find ourselves in a terrifying limbo. Beloved truly despised her hateful spouse and absolutely intended to divorce her, but nothing was ever finalized because her spouse dragged her feet. Beloved clearly intended to change her will to provide for partner and me, but never lived to do it. We are now apparently, if legal aid is to be believed, the tenants of beloved's would-be ex, which cannot be legal or ethical given her animosity and prejudice towards us. And we must either pay the exorbitant, usurious rent she demands or be evicted from our own house. We are counting our small blessings that our state has put a moratorium on evictions. It isn't much, but we will take what crumbs the system throws our way. Sadly, it is due to expire on the 1st of the month, which means one day we will have to face this woman in court and be her punching bags for all the world to see, because she is still so furious at a woman who is already dead. Questions. I hardly know where to start here, but given all of the above, I suppose to have 5 questions, in relative order of importance. Do we have a cause of action against beloved's spouse for stealing and burning her body and keeping the remains from us, given that they were on an inevitable path to divorce, and beloved absolutely would not have wanted her spouse to be anywhere near her, as evidenced by initiating the divorce process? If beloved's spouse is truly our landlord now, how can we prevent her from evicting us or charging us an unconscionable rent? Even granting that she somehow became a landlord, should she not honor the implicit contract we had with beloved, which stipulates that we may live in and use the house as we see fit? Is it legal to demand that your tenants buy their own house from you? What would be the best way for us to challenge and defeat beloved's will, given that she intended for us to live in our house and that her spouse abandoned it? Do we expose ourselves to retaliatory charges if we file an ethics complaint against beloved's spouse's attorney for deadnaming her? Thank you all for your assistance and for keeping an open mind. Top comments below. Somebody said, 1. No. Unless she specifically designated how the body should be treated, the spouse decides. They are the spouse until the divorce is final. No amount of going to be divorced matters. If the spouse violated that portion of the will, since you are not in the will, it's likely you still have no cause. 2. You can't. The only contract that is binding is a written contract. You have your state's month-to-month tenant protections, and that is it. 3. So long as you both agree to the terms, sure. 4. You're not going to. At the end of the day, it was her responsibility to keep an updated will. 5. If she did not legally change her name, then this would be fruitless, as legal documents are going to use their legal name. If she legally changed her name, then you should just tell them that her legal name at time of death was X. I want to take a moment to point out that this has zero to do with being poly or trans or anything. This kind of thing happens quite often where someone's life changes greatly, but a failure to update the will leaves everything in chaos. Another commenter. As sad as the circumstances are, your partner did not update her will despite knowing that it needed to be done to ensure you and the other partner be beneficiaries rather than her spouse. That's the sad truth. Acknowledging wanting your will changed but not following through with getting it done doesn't cut it. As for the house, it is still in both her and her spouse's name, so unless her spouse agreed to relinquish ownership and title it only in your partner's name, your partner couldn't grant you any sort of ownership of the property, even if she had updated her will. At best, you and your partner would become co-owners with her spouse. You would then have to come to some sort of settlement to get the spouse's name off the title. There's really not much chance you have any rights to the home more than a month-to-month tenancy. As for her spouse being the landlord now, yes, that's very possible. As the owner of the property, she is now your landlord, and you are likely a month-to-month tenant. If it's as contentious as it sounds, she can ask that you vacate in 30 days. She can also increase the rent with 30 days' notice as well. Any implicit contract you had with your partner does not carry over to her spouse. Period. The third post was posted by the wife. I finally have my house back, but my life will never be back to normal. 8.5 months ago, my wife sent one of the men she'd been cheating on me with to my job with an illegal divorce decree to sign. That same night, the rest of her harem threw me out of my house and moved themselves in. 5 months ago, she killed herself, and the 2 dumbass-in-chief who'd made themselves home in my house refused to leave, claiming the house was theirs. At the advice of my lawyer, I put on a magic hat that said I was a landlord, and they were month-to-month tenants who wouldn't pay rent and did the song and dance routine of evicting people from my house. This was right around the time my state implemented a moratorium on evictions. So now, in addition to being the kind of asshole who would evict someone, I was the kind of asshole who had to have laws passed to keep me from doing harm. And the dumbass in my house reveled in that. They were living for free in my house that I was still paying the mortgage for, sending me regular death threats, while they hadn't even finished moving in all of their stuff from their old apartment, and I was living in an unfurnished 1-bedroom and sleeping on a pile of laundry because between all of the current and new expenses, I couldn't afford a mattress. But I was that puss and that dyke and the evil capitalist. And it wants just them saying that or making the threats either. It was their friends and family, people who I'd thought had been my friends, random looky-loos who saw their social media posts about it, and every now and then a garden variety asshole who was passing by. I cannot begin to describe how much it screwed me up to have an eviction under my belt during a pandemic as the evictor. I cannot begin to describe how much it screwed me up knowing the only way I could enforce the eviction order would be through calling the cops after George Floyd, or seeing the damage those two dumbasses had done to my home, or the utter shit show that actually getting them physically out of the house turned into. I have my house back. The people who took it from me are gone for now. Things are not and never will be back to normal. And in the end, it almost certainly won't have been worth it, but this was the outcome that would have hurt me the least. Some comments below. The part that got me was how they kept insisting that she abandoned it, even after describing planning to kick her out and packing her things. Those people were so disgusting. Poor you, someone said. The part that got me was all the misogyny oozing out of their words. Their beloved was perfect, even though she was cheating on her wife, but the wife who was doing her best to protect and support their beloved was a frigid puss. And when I got to the part where they were damning her for paying the mortgage over their head during divorce negotiations, I thought, what the hell? You threw this woman out of her own house without discussion or warning, and with a whole crowd of people watching. Despite the fact that you had an apartment that you could have moved your beloved into, and you didn't even make any attempt to take over the mortgage payments from the person you illegally evicted? And yeah, the crowd of people they organized to pressure her into leaving quietly? That was such a mindfuck. Reading through everything again and joining up the dots. When original poster describes being called transphobic and all sorts of other names by her friends, while she was still trying to support her wife in her transition and do everything to adjust to the changes in her marriage. How much do you want to bet that everyone in their social circle knew about the affair, except her? Except they'd all been told that Pauline was moving on and original poster was dragging her heels to make life difficult. A commenter, I hate to be that person, but this just seems too abrupt and black and white to be real. The first post, sure, partners can be shitty and kick you to the curb when you're trying your best to make things work. And trans partners are no exception. But then we have a post from the co-cheaters that seems way too out there, and the final update, the ex-wife ends herself out of nowhere. An original poster is dealing with hate and accusations of bigotry from friends and family, even the transphobic ones. Having a spouse transition is hard on a marriage, and I'm sympathetic to cis spouses working through that. But this seems more like how someone imagines it would go down than a true story.